Why is no one talking about this? As we see governments and agencies toss the blame for the poor preparations of the California wildfires, Elon Musk just put his finger on something much deeper. It's how environmental overregulations have made this crisis a dozen times worse than it would have been starting years ago. I think you need to see this conversation for yourself because it's a truth that no one wants to talk about.
Now the country, when I ask if we're on the right track or the wrong track, they never say that we're on the right track anymore.
Okay.
There is an
well, hopefully, hopefully with this, I'm actually pretty optimistic about the next 4 or 5 years. I think we're actually I think we have the potential for a golden age. So we need to, it's very important to get rid of the mountain of regulations that are holding things back. And I don't mean, there's some good regulations, but there's just so much that we just can't get anything done. I mean, you take sort of the California wildfires, for example. We really need to have fire breaks, and we need to clear the brush back away from houses, and we need to make sure the reservoirs are full. These are all kind of obvious things, but due to a bunch of environmental rulings, you can't actually do that in California. So they're not allowed to do the fire breaks, and they're not allowed to push the brush back away from houses because it might hurt some like red-legged frog or something like that. There's like some sort of creature. Usually a creature you've never heard of that is preventing this from occurring.
Sounds crazy, right? And yet anyone that's trying to cover up for the string of unavoidable failures by simply chalking it all up to the climate probably just doesn't want you to know the real reasons that the California wildfires were a perfect storm of bad decisions in the years prior. And unsurprisingly, every single one of them has to do with government overreach and overregulation under a far-left governor like Gavin Newsom, and now Elon Musk isn't even entertaining the conversation on climate anymore because he knows that discussion absolves the state government of responsibility. He wrote on X, quote, "These fires are easily avoidable, but nonsense regulations in California prevent action being taken, so year after year homes burn down and more people lose their lives." Before I tell you what they are, I'd love you to be a part of the conversations, so please be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss out. Now remember, overregulation is precisely the reason that Elon Musk, as well as his companies like SpaceX, eventually had to move out of California. And if it rises to the threshold, imagine the hoops that smaller companies and government agencies have to jump through if they wanted to be logically prepared for a wildfire like this, especially when it was a high-risk time of the year, and one of those was the CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality, that ended up prioritizing fish like salmon and smelt over having large reservoirs of fresh water. Instead, several dams and barrages were destroyed under Newsom's watch to save fish, which is baffling. A lot of people now see in hindsight. And if you want an idea of just how far these bad policies go, take a look at this TV segment from over a decade ago, as we saw the first signs of the entire essential water infrastructure being altered and made less efficient in order to preserve a tiny fish that's smaller than the palm of your hand.
An endangered fish could cost you more money at the grocery store. 23ABC's Chris Ornelas explains how a spike in deaths of Delta smelt could affect your wallet.
This little fish is at the heart of a big controversy. Officials say too many Delta smelt have been killed recently by the pumps that move water from the San Joaquin Delta to the Central Valley. So the agencies protecting the endangered fish are taking action.
Right now we're seeing the presence of some smelt, very small quantities near the pumps. When that occurs, the fish agencies that regulate the amount of pumping that can occur have sought to reduce the amount of pumping that's allowed.
In an effort to protect the endangered smelt, they're slowing the amount of water that can be pumped out of the Delta, and that will affect how much water Kern County farmers have for irrigation.
For Kern County, that means our water users have lost the use of about 100,000 acre-feet of water. It's a significant impact to our local water users and our local economy.
You heard that right. In what many are calling a first policy under Gavin Newsom, it's truly a revelation to hear that this long-held Democratic state of Cali has been suffering under the burden of overregulation for such a long time. And unfortunately, it stretches all the way back to today when fire trucks from Oregon had to be held for procedural checks and safety regulations before they could be deployed, which many are complaining delayed the response in fighting the wildfire. And that
there's like this fish called the smelt, for example, so we have far more freshwater runoff into the ocean than we should really, and on the theory that it helps this one little fish that likes a slightly briny freshwater saltwater mix. and if we keep more fresh water, then the smelt fish will not be happy. But there's no actual evidence that the smelt fish is going to be unhappy if we keep a bit more fresh water. In fact, so we should keep more fresh water, keep the reservoirs full, and just have some sensible fire breaks and move the brush away from houses. That's just an example of like we've saved a lot of trouble, a lot of tragedy in LA if we'd done that.
Now, that's because there's two major reasons that have made these wildfires a lot worse than they had to be. First is the unavailability of adequate fresh water reserves and proper infrastructure. Secondly, it's the environmental regulations that made it much harder to carry out prescribed burnings in forests, which got rid of dried leaves and timber in a controlled manner that they didn't become fuel for a future fire. And that's critical to make sure no such fire engulfs an entire neighborhood up to the coastline. These prescribed fires usually happen around October during fall, but they were halted last year due to environmental concerns of air pollution, ironically, as well as conservation of personnel and resources, ironically. Now, to Trump's credit, and concern over unclean forests in the neighborhood is something he's been talking about for quite a few years, actually, including during his first presidency, resurfacing in this clip.
Here we are with thousands of acres and billions of dollars every year. It's the same thing every year. And they don't want to clean up their forests because they have environmental problems in cleaning it up. It should be the opposite, because you're going to lose your forest. You'll lose it. But it's costing our country hundreds of billions of dollars because of incompetence in California. So the people, I'm speaking now for the people of California, they don't want to see this happen. They're getting destroyed. And it's hurting our budgets, it's hurting our country, and they just better get their act together.
But now the solution isn't to just let it be and build up into something like we see now, where all of that flammable tinder only awaits to spark up light. Surprisingly, this is a concern that has existed nearly 6 years ago as well, when Forbes reported that, quote, "This is California's big secret. It's not climate change that's burning the forest, killing people and destroying hundreds of homes. It's decades of environmental mismanagement that has created a tinderbox of unharvested timber, dead trees, and thick underbrush." And none of that would be difficult to do if government red tape and tiresome overregulation did not get in the way and slow down the entire process. Now someone like Elon Musk, who feels the weight of government regulations painfully well, having formerly placed his companies in California, had quite a way to demonstrate the absurd levels of government overreach and environmental regulation in the state. Listen to this.
We had to do this, SpaceX had to do the study to see if Starship would hit a shark. And I'm like, it's a big ocean, you know. There's a lot of sharks. It's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. And I said, well, you have to, you know, this is, I think, from National Marine Fisheries, one of the, you know, NIMF it's called. You know, they were like, well, you have to do the study on whether you're going to hit a shark. We're like, what? And then we said, okay, fine, we'll do the analysis. And then, well, can you give us the shark data? They're like, no, we can't give you the shark data. We're like, okay, well, then we're in a bit of a quandary. How do we solve this this shark probability issue? And they said, well, we could give it to our Western division, but we don't trust them. And I'm like, am I in a comedy sketch here?
No, he's not. And that should be frightening when you see the consequences can lead to a government forcing everyone to jump through 100 different hoops to get any action done. And nowhere is this manifested in a worse way than in the state and local government's ability to mobilize essential resources in response to the wildfire. But tell me in the comments if you agree, and share this with your friends and family to get the word out. After this crisis ends, there will certainly be a lot to answer for by the mayor and the governor, and a lot of angry citizens demanding answers that could decide the political direction for the party in the years to come.